couple of questions to come, Councillor. One is, do you not think it's a failure, the fact that Europe couldn't make a united stand and call for cessation and condemning outright what is going on, the genocide is going on in the Middle East and the fears of the spread there? Also, can I ask you, Minister, under what treaties specifically are we duty-bound to take in so many refugees, the percentage and IPAS applicants here in this country? The Taoiseach has welcomed the fact that Georgia has accession status, has openness commenced. Has the Taoiseach at any time, or you, expressed the concerns about, and I have figures and I picked them out of the sky, the parliamentary replies about the number of Georgian nationals and so Deputy in Old Grealish that have come in with no documentation to Dublin Airport? Absolutely none. So are you bringing those things up when these accession discussions, when your opportunities are there with our officials or with the ministers? And also, can I ask, the amount of people that are coming into this country and have been forced, that they've applied for international protection in many other European countries, have been refused, and namely the EU at the moment, they're coming over here through the north and down here by car or by bus and everything else, and ending up here. Surely that, I think Deputy Crowe earlier said it, if they've come through a plethora of countries from a war-torn area, and we sympathise with them in that, and come and go through all EU countries, or many, maybe a half dozen or maybe 10, and end up here, we just can't cope here. And being told out, the narrative put out that anyone that says anything is racist. That is an awful situation, and it's bubbling under the surface, and it's annoying people, and it's going to get worse. So, as I said, I tell you what treaties, because I understand under Lisbon too, we, like Denmark and others, have an opt-out clause. And why don't we do that? And has your government signed up now an agreement that now if we don't take certain numbers that we'll have to pay so much per person that we didn't take? But if you could answer those questions, please, especially the one about the treaties, and if you spoke to the Georgian ministers about what's happening here, and also the fact of the border with Northern Ireland with not being policed, they're coming through here wholesale. People that have been in England, have been elsewhere for a number of years, and then coming here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Deputy McGrath, in relation to our asylum-seeking obligations, they're in the UN International Human Rights obligations, part of the United Nations. That's where our obligations come from in the first instance, and it's very important that we do live up to those obligations. In relation to Georgia, I had spoke on a number of occasions with the ambassador here in relation to presentations of individuals coming from a safe country. They had made a huge effort in terms of bringing their police attaches over to Ireland to work with people coming off the planes to ensure that it did reduce, and it actually did reduce drastically. I know it has crept up again, but we are doing work in relation to that, because it is very important that the most vulnerable people coming into our state that need protection get it, and that's what the system is trying to do, and obviously speed up the amount of time we take in processing applications, which I think is going to be critical into the future, as well as that agreement on the Asylum and Migration Pact in terms of how we do that. And also it's very important to realise in terms of when we use ideology, we saw this is a very complex issue. We saw on Brexit, when it was said that if you vote for Brexit, the number of those coming into the UK seeking asylum, we saw the fake posters that Farage and other actors had up. And what happened? People seeking asylum in the UK has increased drastically since Brexit. We saw in Italy, when it took a sharp change to the right, migration was going to be solved, was going to be tackled head on. We saw Lampedusa, we saw huge issues in relation to migration there. This is a very complex problem, and people who think that, sharp slogans or change a government, change a dynamic shift to the right or the left or whatever direction you're talking, governments of all colours right across the globe are finding it very difficult to respond to the migration issue, because people are being weaponised. The most vulnerable are being targeted. And you can see that on the eastern borders of Europe, be it Belarus, be it Russia. They are pushing and using people, vulnerable people, as a weapon. And that causes huge pressure then on society. That's why we have to work in trying to tackle the origins, the problems in these various countries that really people are feeling the brunt of shocking, horrific conditions. And we have to keep continuing that as a government.
Minister, you skirted around the question I asked you about specific obligations that we had under which treaties. You said international treaties. But it's my understanding And I remember at the time of Lisbon 1 and Lisbon 2, the specific commitment was given, an opt-out under Lisbon 2 for countries like ourselves and Denmark and other countries to opt out here. And I also asked you if have the government signed up to an agreement now more recently to pay monies instead of if they can't accommodate the people that have come here. And I also asked you about the situation coming from Great Britain into Northern Ireland, Sheikh Cudi and Sheikh Conde, coming down here down from these counties, because I met people I know this is happening, and the checks that are there. I do welcome your answer about the Georgian situation that you spoke to them about that, and that they had sent in some of the police, but people are being told all the time, you said it again, in generality, international obligations. We are an independent sovereign republic. And there are treaties there, and I want you to explain which treaties specifically, and to answer me if or not that we have an opt-out clause under Lisbon not to refuse to take. I'm not being anti-Christian right here. We just can't cope at the moment, and communities need to be consulted and engaged with, and services need to be put in to help those people. So the people have opened their houses and homes and everything else for the Ukrainians and others, but there are ways of welcoming people that say they just can't. Enough is enough. They have 85% of the IPAS applicants in Tipperary, in one town of Roscrea, and then they've been demonised as bad people. Not fair.
Minister, would you like to deal with those questions, maybe then move into your own wrap-up?
Thank you, Count Corlett. Well, first of all, it is the greatest myth to suggest that we have an opt-out. We don't. And just to specifically explain this, it's the 1954 UN Human Rights Charter that we're working on in terms of our obligation, our core obligation as a country to provide asylum. In relation to Lisbon, that is totally separate. That's an opt-out from this country on justice and home affairs issues or issues of taxation, which means if a European decision has been taken, that Ireland has the option to opt out of that decision under those competencies. But it does not in any way negate your obligations internationally to take in asylum seekers. And that is a myth that has been propagated on social media. Here's Ireland, it has an opt-out. It does not. And if you breach your UN obligations, well, what does that say for you as a country? If you breach your human rights obligations, if we're not a compassionate nation, if we're not a nation that tries to give shelter to those who most need it, the most vulnerable in our society, and that's the core of being Irish in my view, and as a country that we've seen how many people we've sent right across the globe, and so many ministers are so proud in this government when you go to other countries geopolitically right around the world to see so many Irish communities working diligently, making their home in other countries around the world. I mean, proud of being Irish. So I think we need to be very clear in terms of Europe and what Europe can do and where the core responsibility comes from in our international agreements. In